Have you ever stared at your child and thought, what is even happening right now? Or why are you so rude? I've done it. Label, my child's behavior as naughty, disrespectful, or too much. But what if every outburst, whine, or eye roll is actually your child trying to say something they just don't have the words for? Welcome to Mom with Dr. Tash, where we get honest about parenting without shame, but with loads of grace and some seriously helpful strategies. I'm Melody, and with me is Dr. Tash, paediatrician and fellow mom.
Good
Hi,
morning.
Dr. Tash.
Good morning. Thank you for the introduction. Nice to see you again.
Yes, it's awesome. So, I'm excited about today's episode, which is all about a powerful parenting mind shift. What if behavior isn't something to fix, but something to understand? So, Dr. Tash, you've written an article called What Does It Really Mean When Your Child Acts Out, which people can read over at momsatathetable.com. And in this article, we'll unpack how curiosity is one of the most valuable tools in your parenting toolbox. All right, Dr. Tash, question number one.
Yes.
The gist of your article seems to imply that whatever our kids do or say, they're actually trying to tell us something, but they just don't have the skill to do so yet. So I'm going to quote you here because what you wrote, I think, is really important and I don't want to mess it up. So you write, quote, if we skip the step of understanding what's being communicated underneath, we risk misjudging our child, seeing the behavior as a reflection of their character rather than a clue to a need, end quote. So as parents, what you're saying is we need to stop focusing only on stopping the behavior so that we can get to what's underneath. Be curious about what our kids are trying to tell us. That's the skill that you're encouraging us to develop. But let's face it, many of us aren't psychologists. We're not pediatricians. So I don't feel like we have the skills to unpack half of what's happening. Any practical tips on how to get curious instead of reacting?
Yeah, it's a good question. And look, firstly, I think it's also so important to recognize and acknowledge that being reactive is human. And most of us, myself included, respond instinctively, and especially true when we're tired, stressed, or overwhelmed, and that is okay. The goal isn't perfection, it's awareness. You actually don't need to be a psychologist or a pediatrician. You don't need to analyze or know. It's actually not about having the answer. You don't have to get it right. That isn't actually the point. It's just about being open to being curious, because that's what changes the mindset in yourself as well, to start going, is there more to this? And actually the shift in our own mindset is the thing that probably has the biggest difference. Look, even for those of us that are psychologists or pediatricians or psychiatrists, a big part of emotional intelligence is actually also understanding that you can never know what's happening for another person unless you ask. You actually can't read and interpret someone else's words, language, body language, anything, and know what's happening unless you've actually asked. And so it's okay that you don't know the answer. That's not the goal. The goal is just to start to be curious and start to be open. A really helpful shift is to notice that internal dialogue that runs through your head when your child is dysregulated. Often without realizing it, and I'm speaking for myself, we're thinking things like, you're being so defiant, or why are you always being like this, or what on earth is wrong with you? But those thoughts come from a place of assuming the worst. And we're actually seeing our child, without realizing it, subconsciously as being bad rather than having a bad time. And so instead of seeing it as, my child is giving me a really hard time right now, it's actually shifting to that realization that, no, my child is having a really hard time right now. And then following that up with, why is it, or wondering, what might it be that's making this so hard for them right now? So it's a seemingly small shift, but it's actually huge, because it's starting to go from, you're doing this to me, to realizing actually they're not doing anything to you. They're not doing anything to me or us. They're having a really hard time, and it's not about me, it's about them. Whereas I think our common, speaking for myself, internal initial internal dialogue is to go, this is personal almost, and this is like you're deliberately trying to make it harder for me, which we know it's not when we sit down and think about it, but it's that innate unconscious response that we often have. Next step is to then try and imagine yourself in your child's shoes. How has their day been so far? Were they rushed out of the door this morning? Has something been really hard happened at school? Did they have a big expectation? Was there something else going on? And has something happened to throw them off? Is there more to this than just, there's some big behaviours? Has there been a potential trigger? Remember, you do not get it right every time. And as I said, your first instincts are likely to be what you know best, which, depending on what your experience has been, may not be what you want to model. So if you take the flooded bathroom example I shared in the article, my first instinct was definitely not curiosity. It was more like, oh my goodness, seriously, another mess? Why are you trying to give me so much more work? Like, do you have to make my life so hard? That's not what I said, but that's what my internal response was. But because I've been trying to do this work in myself, I was able to do that pause, catch my thoughts, and then go, okay, that's me. That response is about me, not actually what's happening in this situation. And then take the pause and actually genuinely approach with, what are you doing? And that has to be sincere. If you haven't worked through what's going on inside of me before, there's going to be a feeling of, what are you doing in what you ask? So I think we've talked about this before, but in emotional communication, far more of it is about what you don't say than what you do say. So it's not your words, it's your tone, it's your actions, it's your body language, it's how you're holding yourself and gritting your teeth at the same time as you say the words. So it actually does involve that need to pause and go, okay, I've worked through myself before I've responded, because otherwise you can say the perfect sentence that is delivering a different meaning with the body language that's actually being interpreted in that moment.
I guess it's a difference of like, what are you doing versus what are you doing?
Yeah, it was like, oh. So I think what I actually said to him was, I see there's a lot of water. What are you doing? And so it was curiosity. It was just going, oh, what's going on? And if you've read the article, the bathroom was flooded, but my child's motive was actually really pure. It was, I'm trying to clean the texture off my pants. So he was trying to wash his pants in the sink and wash the texture off because he made a mistake, and clearly textured his pants while he was colouring. So if you look at his motive, it was really pure. He was trying to fix something he'd made a mistake with and do the right thing. It's just he's also 3 and
Uncoordinated.
a little bit uncoordinated with the water mess. Probably not where I would have washed it off. But that's not the point. The motive was pure. And so if I'd gone straight to my first response of growling at him, I would never have known what was actually going on for him. And he would have walked away with a message of going, but I was really trying. I was trying to do the right thing. Why did I get in so much trouble for it? And now I really want to reassure you, in no way or form do I get this right every time. Not by a long shot. Like, seriously, listen to that first interview we did again on rupture and repair if you find yourself feeling guilty when you fall short. But I'm trying to do better at pausing, checking myself and my internal dialogue, and being sincerely curious and gently curious about what my child is or trying to do. And a big part of that is going, okay, good kid, good kid, good kid. Let's actually explore what was the motive. What's going on with this behaviour? And that's what I'd encourage others to do. You're not going to get it right all the time. That's okay. It's just starting to be curious.
What you just said reminded me of several years ago. It's a similar bathroom mess. My son was having a shower and there was water everywhere. He's in the shower stall with a door, but there was water everywhere. And I don't remember. I'm pretty sure I got very irritated. But then in the end, I found out what he was trying to do was he was trying to clean the bathroom. He was actually helping me wash the bathroom.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there was a high amount of guilt after that. But yes, it's Yeah, I like the whole, what they're doing. A lot of times we go, why are you so naughty? Why are you so selfish? Why are you doing this? But really, they're just expressing something in not the way that we expect.
And I can so relate to your illustration just then. There are so many times my son is trying to help me. And let's be honest, the help is not what I would, as an adult, you would define the most helpful, but the motive is so pure. And it's a beautiful message. And if I'd snapped every single time with what my first response is, I would never have known that sometimes actually he was really trying to do the right thing. And then you just go, oh, my child's so naughty. They always do this. They always do that. And then we take that filter with how we approach them, and that affects our patience and tolerance with them the next time, and it just keeps going. And so it's actually, as much as it seems seemingly small, realizing that one, our child is a good kid, and that behavior is trying to communicate something, and having that sort of fundamental shift in terms of how we look at it, going, okay, let's get curious, give them a chance, expect the best, think the best in them, think the motive was pure, and I'm going to be curious about what it was. You suddenly realize that actually we so often jump to conclusions.
What I'm thinking now, though, is so a lot of the examples that we've talked about and the examples that you've done in your article as well, right, is about kids, what kids do that can be perceived as bad or naughty, but there is actually, good intentions.
Yes.
But let's talk about full-blown meltdowns,
Mm-hmm.
right? Let's say, for example, let's use a common one that parents face at the supermarket. They've asked for something, we say no, and then they've completely lost it. Do we? I don't know what's their intention there.
Yep. No, it's a fair question. And let's be honest, for most parents, that particular moment is incredibly triggering. You've got people watching, you're juggling groceries, you're probably stressed, maybe there's another child, and your little one completely loses it, or big one completely loses it. And depending on your past experiences, this is likely to be bringing up some pretty big feelings for the adult too. First, can we normalize this? This happens to many parents. And all kinds of parents. It doesn't make you a bad parent. There's nothing wrong with you as a parent if your child is doing this. You have not failed, and your child is not bad. What it means is your child has reached their capacity and is now expressing that in the only way that they can. Remembering that the brain is still maturing, the brain is still developing in children, all children, even to adulthood. And emotional regulation is one of those things that is not fully matured until we are mid-20s. And in that moment, your job is not to stop the meltdown. It's to regulate yourself so that you can try and be the steady anchor your child needs. And that doesn't mean that you're going to get it right every time. And it doesn't mean you're going to feel wonderful about it either. But in that moment, there could be several things that are going on for your kid. All of them come down to, though, we've reached the point where I really can't handle it anymore. So it can be the environment is too stimulating. There's been too much on today. I just can't handle it. There's just too much happening for me right now. And so in that moment, it depends on what exactly the trigger was. But say it was, I wanted something, you said no, and it was the cherry on top of the thing that you said no to whatever I wanted. Let's acknowledge it. So it might be bending down, depending on if they're sitting in a trolley, if they're standing next to you, and just looking at them, being present with them and acknowledging you really wanted that. And I can see you're upset that we cannot get it today. That feels really hard, and I understand. Important, you're not giving in. The boundary still holds. You don't give them the thing to try and appease the emotion. Remember, we're not trying to fix the meltdown, but you're holding that boundary with compassion. You're being present with them and going, I get it. You didn't like the boundary. You got big feelings about it now. Clearly big feelings. There's a full-blown meltdown. And then it's, what do I do now? So remember, at this moment, we have completely lost it. The child is so overstimulated. The reasoning part of the brain has checked out of town. We are offline. We are all emotion at this moment. And so the number one thing you need to do is find safety. And so if the environment you're in, is too stimulating for your child, then there might be a quieter spot that you can move to still within the building. it's just the simple act of reducing the sensory input that can sometimes help. Sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes you need to write it out, and that may take, for some people, a very long time, is the truth. And there's no shortcut to calm that down. They actually need to write it out. Their nervous system's gone into survival, and what they need in that setting is your presence, patience, and steady reassurance. And unfortunately, this is where it gets really hard for parents, because if you're on a time limit at this moment, in truth, your time limit in some ways almost needs to go out the window if possible, because you can't force a time limit on how long it's going to take that child to re-regulate. Some kids will do it quite quickly, but for the neurodivergent kids or the deeply feeling kids, this could be a bit of time. And to be honest, it might be necessary to hit pause on the groceries for a second, leave them in a safe spot with a staff member, and retreat to the car for a reset. Less stimulation. You're cutting out the rest of the environment, and you're just being present and co-regulating with them. I'm not saying that's easy, and I fully appreciate that that's when you go, I'm going to miss swimming, or I'm going to miss this, or I'm going to be late home for this. But I suppose it's thinking about the big picture. Depending on the circumstance, that might be the best situation. Like if you're going to be late to somewhere, that might be better than trying to drag your completely dysregulated, screaming, losing the plot child through this scenario just so you can get to that venue on time. Because let's be honest, by the time you get there, they ain't going to be regulated, and you're not going to be regulated either. But I appreciate that that's hard, and that involves for the parent as well going, oh, I had an expectation that I now need to let go of. So this is hard. This is not easy, and I acknowledge that. For some kids that they calm faster than that, it's not necessary to fully remove yourself from the building and do the proper reset. But it is important to recognize that there are some kids that is the only way that's going to calm down. They need to be in a far less stimulating environment, and they need to ride it out. And so that's hard. It's just, really, really
What
hard.
you said, though, kind of is interesting to me, because I'm asking you about meltdown at a supermarket, and in my head, when I ask you that question, my thinking about what the intention is that, they don't like the fact that we said no. But you've actually brought it back further. So what you're trying to say, I feel like, is that it doesn't have to just be a supermarket meltdown. It could be any meltdown. Because you're saying that it's the stimulation that's just something. So the fact that we said no is just the cherry. It's not the reason, but there's a whole lot of other stories behind the meltdown.
100%. Usually a meltdown has not come out of nowhere. Just like a volcanic eruption has not come out of nowhere. There's been things building. There's something happening under the surface. You might not have seen it, but there's something that's been happening under the surface for some time that's leading up to that eruption. And there's been something happening under that meltdown that's happening. This is just the cherry on top. There's a term that you sometimes hear of the broken cookie phenomenon. And the whole concept is basically that, the child's cookie breaks, and next second they've lost the plot. The world is falling apart, and you're just looking at it like, it's just a broken cookie. It's just a broken cookie. It's really not that big a deal. It has absolutely nothing to do with the cookie. The cookie was the trigger that broke the camel's back, basically. Sorry to use another analogy, but it's just, it was simply the thing that pushed you over the limit. It was the thing that was the final straw on the background of a whole lot of stuff that's going on underneath. And so depending on the child, or depending on the adult, depending on the person, it's a multitude of things that can cause that. It's, how did my day start? Do I feel in control at the moment? Do I feel completely what on earth is happening in my life? Are we stressed about family? Is there something else going on? And that can be stress in the household. That can be stress at school. It can be stress in a relationship. Let's be honest, for our kids, having relationship breakdowns between their friends at school is huge. And if you think about it, reflect on our own experiences of that, you might turn around and go, oh, it's okay. It's just, we all have these experiences. But actually, if you go back to when you were a kid, in that particular moment, it's the biggest thing in the world. And so just because we've dealt with it as adults and we've gone through this process, it's really important. What is empathy? Empathy is the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And so it's really important to keep that in the back of our mind when we do this. In our kids, it's like, okay, to me, you just lost it over what seemingly was the smallest thing in the universe. But let me actually walk through this with you. What happened for you? What were the potential, and you might not know the answer, but you can think about what were the potential triggers. And we've talked about this before, but there's no point trying to figure out in the meltdown, like, tell me what's going on for you. Like, what's the emotion? In that moment, we are all emotion. We have no reason. The brain is offline. That's not the moment to try and pull out all the deep and meaningful connection stuff. What they need you to do at that point is just provide them the safety, get them back on solid ground, and you can have that conversation later when they're more regulated. But it's realizing, for all meltdowns, and if you think about it, they're far less common, but they happen for us as adults too. When you've had a big meltdown, it's usually been driven by a multitude of events that's come up to it. The article example was an adult one in the opening. You've had bosses doing this to you. Someone else has let you down. This has gone wrong. That's gone wrong. This has gone wrong. And let's be honest, we walk into the house at the end of the day after a really bad day like that, and we are feeling triggered. And all you need is a teeny tiny thing for your other half to do to you or your child to do to you. And next second, you bit the head off. And if you look only at the behavior at that moment, it's just like, what's wrong with you? Like, where did that come from? I'm not saying that the behavior is justified, but when you take that step back and you go, okay, that there is something clearly going on under here. It just gives you a little bit more compassion towards, okay, you're having a hard time.
So it sounds like the curiosity, like initially we're talking, the curiosity is just asking, what are you trying to do? But the curiosity sometimes is taking it several steps back, several hours back, several days back to see what has led to this.
Yep.
There's another thing that you did mention in all these examples, right? And you're talking about the parent's role is to, be the anchor, be calm and be steady, which sounds wonderful. The problem is, I don't know about anybody else, but for me, it's not easy, right? When they are dysregulated, you're going, you are triggered as well, and you're getting dysregulated. I know I'd get very dysregulated. And, some of us also grow up in an environment where we're told as kids to, stop crying or something similar. How do we break all of that? What do we do?
It's a big one. It's a big one. And I suspect it'll hit a nerve for some people. And that's because it's so hard. And it's really confronting because it's confronting things in yourself as well. And I really do understand. I've definitely heard those things growing up in terms of stop crying, go to your room until you feel calm. The reality is when that's been the norm, not the exception, the norm of our lives, we probably never learnt what emotional regulation really looks like. And so what we've learned is to shut down, to internalize, to hide our feelings because it didn't feel emotionally safe to show them. And we all seek connection. And so when our children learn again and again that certain emotions push their caregivers away, we adapt by keeping those feelings in. But we don't actually learn how to process them. We just learn how to suppress them. Often, those same feelings that we have found, or that our parents found hardest to hold in us, are the ones that we find hardest to hold and manage in our own kids. And so as a parent, when your child is showing these big emotions, it can really stir something up inside you that feels really uncomfortable. And it's not necessarily that what your child is doing is wrong. It's because your body doesn't actually feel safe with those feelings because you've never learnt that safety. And so there's a concept of what we call reparenting, and that's where this sort of comes in. And this is hard. Let's be true, it's hard. But what it basically is learning to give ourselves the support and the emotional safety that we may not have received when we were growing up, whilst at the same time trying to show up differently for our kids. And the first part of that is self-awareness. As I said, this is hard. The first part of that is self-awareness and the ability to self-reflect and go, oh, okay, what's going in it for me? And so that's why it often starts with what's happening in me when we're having those trigger moments, because we are all having some experience in these moments. Even if you had perfect parents, you will still be having an experience when your child is having big feelings. When any other human you're dealing with closely is having big feelings, it triggers something within us. And so if we can first try and be in tune with what's happening in us, then it gives us a little bit of insight into, okay, I'm starting to notice a pattern here. Why is it that I always seem to react in that way? Or why is it that this seems to be really triggering for me? And so it gives us a place to start working with, if that makes sense. And so when we are reparenting, it's that moment that, your child is totally falling apart and everything in you wants to just shut down. But instead of doing so, you take a breath. You notice your own reaction and you choose to respond with a presence and connection rather than disconnecting. Even though what's happening inside for you initially is hard, it's challenging, it's trying, it's hard. And it doesn't mean getting it perfect. I certainly don't. It's just noticing what's coming up for you and trying to respond from the parent you're trying to become rather than the reactions you've inherited or learned along the way. And remembering and recognizing that co-regulation starts with our own regulation. And if we can stay steady and grounded, even if we need to step away for a moment to get there, then what we're teaching our kids is that their feelings aren't too much and that they're not alone in them. And that in doing so, when we start to see that our kids are having different experiences than we did, that actually often causes a lot of healing in ourselves as well, in some of those same parts. I think it's really important to add, especially in this sort of discussion, there is a place for seeking professional support in this journey. Depending on what your pasts are, you can't do this alone. I honestly believe that every single human being would benefit from talking to a therapist, from a good therapist, because we've all grown up in an imperfect world and in imperfect humans, and that there's nothing wrong with that. But especially if you've had really traumatic backgrounds or if you've had a lot of struggles in your own past, you don't have to do this alone. Psychology, counselling, other mental health support, there are professionals out there that can journey this road with us as well. And it's not easy, but it is so powerful to do that. And if for anyone who's ever sort of work through some of that self-healing and then they see it differently in our kids, when our kids, aren't having those same traumas that we had, it's really, it brings you a feeling of it can be different. It can be better. That doesn't mean you're perfect, but it just means that baby steps, the journey counts, growth counts. But no, it's hard. I acknowledge that.
I do like what you say though. It's the whole, taking the breath and then thinking about the parent that you would rather want to be, and so not reacting straight away. Yeah, just thinking about how, it's well, we will not give them the trauma that we had, but we'll just give them a different set of trauma instead. But, being imperfect parents.
And the reality is we're not going to, we all have, it doesn't matter how hard our parents tried. Even if they were really, really good parents, we're still going to have something that was triggering for us. There's a tremendous power in rupture and repair. And that's why I always come back to that point, because you're going to rupture, but the repair matters more. And so it's knowing that, the ability to say sorry and acknowledging our own self. It's not apologizing for things that weren't yours. It's acknowledging your own reaction, your own feelings, and with the part you played.
Yeah, and giving us the grace to know that, we will make mistakes, but that we are trying our best.
100%.
What we have been talking so far has a bit of a focus on younger children. But I'm wondering, this concept that behavior is communication, does it extend to older children and teens as well? So, teenage traits like moodiness, rebelliousness, and rudeness. Is that behavior? And is that behavior communication as well? And what do we do?
Yeah, it's hard. Look, I think a big part of the reason why a lot of the focus is on the younger kids is the examples I give you in my own life are all younger kids, because that's the part of my life journey that I'm currently at. But no, 100%. The idea that behavior is communication extends to children, to older children, teenagers, and honestly, even to adults, as I sort of alluded before. I would say, though, that it's not only just as important. There's also, it's harder in those ages, because when you've got more life experiences, when you've learned more coping or adaptive mechanisms, sometimes you can give off a different impression than what you actually need in the words that you say. So if you've learned, oh, I can't safely express this, I'm fine. And we've all experienced that. You hear someone go, I'm fine. You're like, I know you're not fine. It's like, no, I'm fine. And so like it's not as simple. It's much easier to interpret it in toddlers, because they've usually not learned those filters. And it does get much harder in teens, older children, teens and adults, depending on the experiences they've had. But it doesn't mean that it's not there. And it doesn't mean that behavior is not still a form of communication. It's just that what's driving their behaviour usually isn't quite so obvious and is far more cryptic and difficult to figure out as such. And so in those moments, you're probably not going to be able to decipher your teenager if you haven't had a close relationship with them for an extended period of time as such. In those moments, what matters first is actually the connection, and like not trying to go, I'm going to figure out exactly what's going on. Tell me exactly what's going on. Like, you have to tell me what's going on. It's just not going to work. You can't force another human to do that. But when you build connection builds safety. Safety builds the opportunity to go, I can test the waters. Is it safe? Is it really safe? And so depending on the background, depends on how much time that sort of thing takes. But yes, absolutely, it is still important. So another difference is behavior feels more personal in teenagers. Like, a toddler throws a toy, you see it as immature. A teen rolls their eyes, slams the door, gives you the cold shoulder. And it's like, you are so disrespectful. And it can, and it can lead into power struggles, which are also never helpful. So behavior is always communication. In a teenager, in an adult, it might still be, I feel misunderstood. I don't know how to handle the pressure I'm under. Or for teens especially, and the maturing child, it's, I need space and autonomy, but I don't necessarily know how to ask for it respectfully. So it's pushing back on the boundaries of going, no, I feel too controlled at this moment in time. I need to be more me. And it's really important, because we're not raising kids. We're not raising adults to only ever do what we tell them to do. We're actually raising independent young adults or independent adults that hopefully have the ability to reflect on, well, what's my body saying to me? What's my need saying to me? Who am I? And how do I express myself? And how do I express myself safely, but also respectfully of other people? And that comes from being given autonomy, but also being guided and directed within that journey as well. Now, so it doesn't mean we excuse rudeness or let go of boundaries because it's like, oh, well, you're communicating to me. It just means we try and pause before reacting and ask ourselves, okay, that was really, really rude. But what might be going on underneath this? What's happening in the world that I might not be seeing in this moment? And as I said, hard truth is a teenager is not going to open up to you unless they feel emotionally safe. And so if there's been a background of, things aren't ideal at this point in time, we don't have the perfect relationship, connection comes first. And so it might actually be, you know what, at this moment in time, it's not worth the fight. Like, it's not a fight worth having about this behavior and that behavior and this behavior and that behavior. But actually, let's just connect. Let's try and find a point of connection that we do something together that is fun, and to still show that, I'm not, we've got a relationship. There has to be a basis of relationship before you do anything else. Otherwise, they're especially some teenagers, you're not going to get through to them. And so if staying curious, they might not open the door up straight away, but you're keeping that door open to be able to. When you do it consistently and they go, oh, okay, I see safety, then they'll come back. Whereas if we come through with punishment, judgment, lectures, they shut us out. Especially teenagers, you will lose them. It's like, I don't respect you, I'm not connected, I'm not listening. And it all comes back at that point to the connection. And it's a real test at first, especially if this has been a difficult dynamic for a period of time. And, again, professional support in these sort of things can be really helpful, because often the behaviours get worse before they get better, especially when you're trying to sort of, once people start feeling safe, sometimes it's like, well, I'm going to show you what's really going on in me, and then the big explosions come. But yes, going back to your fundamental question, behaviour is communication at every age. It's just that there's a whole lot more onion layers that grow as people get older, and
Yay!
it's really hard. It's especially if when you've done it from young, it's much, much easier because you've set the foundations, you've built with it. But let's be honest, sometimes circumstances, environments, other things have happened. It's not always possible to have had it perfect. You were barely holding it together for the first 10 years of your child's life, for instance. You're not going to have been your best parent, and now you're doing your best you can, but you're dealing with the backlash of the last 10 years and maybe the effects that have happened within that. It doesn't make someone a bad parent. They're doing the very best that they can, but there's a lot of layers that need to be worked through to build that emotional safety, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think the important gist that I got from what you just told me, and through our entire conversation about this whole behavior is communication, right? Is not to take it personally. So, firstly, we don't label the kid for being naughty or for them being disrespectful, and also to realize that they're not doing it to us and trying to do it. They're just they're reacting to something, and it's not us being mean to them or that they hate us.
Yep.
And it's our job to find out.
It's actually such an important point to bring up, and it's such a good point to bring up because, let's be honest, speaking for myself, most of us have come from backgrounds where, it's felt very personal. And so it's very natural to go, this is personal, how disrespectful you are, how could you do this to me? And let's be honest, it feels, when adolescents do it, it feels personal, feels really, really personal. Yes. And that's because sometimes the words are very, very personal. Even what's being delivered is actually very, very personal. But it's recognizing that it's coming from a place of dysregulation. It's coming from a place of, I'm not okay. And, I'm trying to tell you that I'm not okay in the best way I feel fit. And if they haven't felt like I've heard it, it's like I'm just escalating my big behavior until you hear me that I'm not okay, sort of thing. And so it's realizing that when we focus on just the behavior and correcting that, you're just getting this endless cycle, vicious cycle of it just getting it escalating. Whereas having someone come in, and it's much better to be the adult to do so because we're the more mature one, and go, I see that you're having a hard time, rather than calling out that, how dare you be so rude to me? It's like, I hear that what's coming beneath this is that you're having a really rough time. Then it kind of disarms the escalation cascade, if that makes sense, and gives that opportunity to go, okay, let's get to the bottom of things. Does not justify the behavior, but it's just going, okay, let's come back to what's underneath this. How can we unpack this together? And then at an appropriate time, how can we talk about maybe how we could communicate that differently next time? But yeah, and for us, it sometimes takes a lot of self-work to go, okay, this wasn't about me, because otherwise in that moment it feels very much about you. And so it's hard. It's hard. But it's really powerful when you get through it, and it has a huge benefit to our relationships when we do.
It's a good hope and that we can achieve too. Unfortunately, laundry needs to be done, dishes need to be washed, life needs to happen, and I'm not going to hold everyone listening for too much longer. So I'm just going to ask, what takeaway do you want people listening to remember from this idea of curiosity that behavior is communication?
Yeah, I think if there's one takeaway, it's this: behavior isn't the enemy. It's a messenger. And so when we start seeing behaviors, even the big, yucky, really challenging ones, not as something that has to be fixed, but as something that's trying to tell us something or communicate something that's going on, it can make a big change in the way we perceive our children. And perceive, okay, what's actually going on with them, rather than you're bad or they're always trying to do this to me, as to, okay, you're having a really hard time, what might be going on under this? Because underneath every outburst, every shutdown, every defiant, no, I'm not doing that with you or for you, there's usually something else going on. It might be a feeling that's too big to name, a need that hasn't been met yet, or just the nervous system that is totally overwhelmed and is struggling to remain regulated for whatever reason that might be. And so when we stay curious instead of judging straight away, it helps us to shift from reacting to connecting. And that doesn't mean we abandon our boundaries. It just means that when the boundary comes across, they come across really differently when they come across from a place of understanding rather than trying to control. And so next time you're in the thick of it, take a breath, ask yourself, what might this behavior be trying to tell me? Doesn't mean you're going to know. It's not always going to be clear. But just asking the question and staying curious and open is what keeps this relationship strong. And it helps us see our kids as fundamentally good. And our kids need us the most, not when they're calm and everything's going well, but they need us the most when they're really struggling to hold it together. And in taking this approach, it gives them the message that you don't have to be perfect to be loved. And I'm here, even when it's really hard.
It's what you just said just now was like, oh, yeah, it's not about trying to fix something, which we all have a tendency to do. We just want to fix something, but it's about understanding. And I guess a nod to our first episode of the podcast, it's about understanding and about connecting first.
Yep.
Fixing comes later. Understanding and connection comes first.
Yeah. And remember,
Oh.
perfection is not the goal. And it's so important to show yourself self-compassion as a parent in the moments that you fall short. There's nothing that can ever be gained from shaming yourself and saying, I'm a terrible parent, I can never get it right. Like you're a good parent who's doing the best they can with the information they have. And sometimes it's hard.
Most of the time it is.
True.
Well, thank you for your time, Tash, and thank you for that reminder.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to episode 2 of Mom to Mom with Dr. Tash. If you're nodding along, make sure to check out Dr. Tash's full article, What It Really Means When Your Child Acts Out, on the Mums at the Table website. If this episode has helped you, hit that subscribe or follow button and share it with a friend who's in the thick of parenting too. And don't forget, we'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts, reflections, or questions by emailing us at hello@mumsattetable.com. Who knows, your question might spark the topic of a future episode. We'll see you next time on Mom to Mom with Dr. Tash.